I've done Kanto, I've done Johto, and now it's time for the top 10 Hoenn Pokemon to get a Mega Evolution in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Or the sequel version, or maybe 8th generation. We don't really know the status of Megas right now, but it's still a very fun video to talk about, especially when we see how many Megas already exist for Hoenn Pokemon, mostly from Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Just poured a ton of Megas into the game, and now the 3rd generation has the most of any generation with 20. There are 20 Mega Evolutions of Hoenn Pokemon, so that kind of makes it to where there's not a lot to make this list about, but still pretty cool to talk about, especially when number 10 on this list is going to be Shedinja. Now, the reason why it's number 10 is potentially how game-breaking it is, that Shedinja is already one of the scariest Pokemon in the game. It's pretty much the only Pokemon where you have an instant win condition if your opponent does not have a way to counter it, so buffing it in any way, especially with that Wonder Guard ability is very scary. So what I was thinking is we keep Wonder Guard, and all we do is add 1 point to the hit points. Now, 1 base stat to the hit points does some really funky things when we start breaking it down into like how hit points and base stats and how everything is calculated, because 1 in a base stat equals 1, but 2 in a base stat, like hit points, actually gives Shedinja 145 hit points, and it's almost too scary to put anything more into that. Now, to at least keep it rounded and at least kind of go with the rest of the trend of Mega Pokemon, I was thinking we could also put the other 99 points into exclusively defense. So really it means that Shedinja isn't going to survive a super effective special attack, but it's still going to be at risk of going down to a physical attack, even with the 144 defense. That 145 base hit points is almost nothing. That's still less than a Shuckle, and you're most likely not going to be putting any EVs in the hit points. Really, the only reason why I'm thinking about this is because Shedinja needs to survive status. It needs to survive weather. You know, that's the biggest weakness that Shedinja has. So effectively just using the Mega Evolution to make that not as much of a problem, and then boosting the defense, because when you hit yourself in confusion, it bases it off the defense. So Shedinja hits itself in confusion, takes less damage, and then can still survive a couple of turns of status, or at least give the opportunity to receive a heal pulse, be under safeguard, have something happen to where now Shedinja has a chance of surviving instead of immediately dying to any old little hit. Now, another fun thing is that modification of hit points seems possible in Pokemon Sun and Moon, because we see that Zygarde Complete has the ability that whenever it goes below 50% hit points in its 10% form or in its 50% form, that it actually gains base hit points. We haven't seen this happen with any forms, any Mega Evolutions before, so maybe Shedinja could also be a very exclusive exception, that, you know, it's going from 1 hit points to max hit points, so there's no really weird damage calculations and hit point base stat modification going on. You just readjust it when it Mega Evolves, and now Shedinja doesn't die immediately. On to number 5, Solrock. On to number 8, Lunatone. Pretty much, I'm taking a lazy way out of here, because both these Pokemon deserve to get Mega Evolutions in Pokemon Sun and Moon. It just makes the most sense. But since I am a bigger fan of Moon version, and I am Team Moon, Lunatone's going to get number 8, but these Pokemon are still definitely worthy of the list. I mean, it's called Moon version and Sun version, for crying out loud, and also a lot of people were speculating that we would get Mega Solrock and Mega Lunatone in Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, because they are very unique Pokemon that kind of help define what the generation does in some ways, and then with the game just being called Pokemon Sun and Moon, if Mega Evolutions have any large role in the games, then Solrock and Lunatone, those are the obvious ones. So, going to be pretty low on the list, I guess, you know, 8th and 9th, just because they have to be there somewhere, but at the same time, it's kind of a dead giveaway. So let's go on to number 7, Masquerain. Now, Masquerain can be a really strong Pokemon, and I was thinking about its Mega Evolution, just kind of turning it into a Volcarona, mostly just because of Quiver Dance. So just basing like Mega Masquerain as this huge Quiver Dance Pokemon that can also take it to the next level with modified stats, we can get some fun out of it. Now, currently, Masquerain works out really well because it has the Intimidate ability, so you drop your opponent's attack, you gain your special defense, and then you get to Mega Evolve and gain a new kind of ability. Now, I was thinking Shield Dust could work as a really good ability, just prevents added effects, kind of makes Masquerain a bit more consistent, and it does what Mawile does. You know, Mawile comes in, drops down the Intimidate, makes it harder for it to get knocked out, and then it goes and Mega Evolves into a really good ability. I was also thinking maybe Swarm could work, because if we're playing as like a pseudo tanky Quiver Dance bulk into Pokemon, that you'll probably survive somewhere in lowish hit points. So if you survive in the red and then you already have 2 Quiver Dances, you're outspeeding everything, getting a boost to your stab could just be ultimately destructive on anything your opponent is going to bring. Now, as for the stats onto Masquerain, I was thinking we could probably just put some junk stats in the attack. I've noticed with some Mega Pokemon that it does kind of get, you know, they really get 90 or 80 stat points that actually work towards helping out the Pokemon. Balancing out the defenses, so 1 on 2 in defense, special defense, a little bit in special attack since we're going to be boosting that anyways, and then a little bit of speed just to kind of make it to where Masquerain's more consistent. I think that that's the biggest emphasis on this Mega, but then it also gets Roost, and it gets Giga Drain and Icy Wind, and then you can run Bug Buzz, you can also run Air Slash for Stab. Masquerain gets all kind of really crazy things. Wait, why is this Pokemon number 7 on this? Alright, I'm going to promote Masquerain to like number 4 on this list, so that means we're going to have number 7, Armaldo. Armaldo is another really good candidate for getting some kind of Mega Evolution. I think it makes a lot more sense and can be taken further than a Cradily, and when we think about it, Mega Aerodactyl is the only other fossil Pokemon that has a Mega Evolution, so could make it work with Armaldo. And then I found this art. This art is a really cool idea, and it kind of shows a lot of different things about how fossils work. That there is a theory going around that fossils are imperfect, that since they're petrified in rock, it's why every fossil type Pokemon is a rock type, and it might not capture the true form that that Pokemon existed in the past. So that means we could use the Mega Evolution to unlock potentially this Pokemon's true form. And I also do like this design because it kind of looks like Kha'Zix, so this could be a very agile Pokemon, maybe even give it speed boost. So we have another speed boost Pokemon that could work out and then just go and shred some fools. Like, we already know Armaldo gets Swords Dance, so your Swords Dance and Speed Boost. Now we have a Bug-type Blaziken with maybe not as crazy stats, and then it can still play around pretty well. Okay, number 6 on this list is going to be Claydol. So Claydol is already a mysterious psychic Pokemon that has, like, crazy powers and auras and stuff, so it just kind of makes sense that I could get a Mega Evolution in an altered form that just plays onto its inner strengths. And the weirdest thing about Claydol is that it only has the Levitate ability. No secondary ability, no hidden ability, it only has Levitate. So we can really only go up from there with no matter what ability we give it. Now, another thing that Claydol does have going for it is the moveset. That Claydol's moveset is pretty good. It gets Ice Beam, and then we can get dual stab on like Earth Power and Psychic or Psyshock. Maybe even bring in a Calm Mind or have some kind of recovery option. So we can do some well-rounded stuff, or maybe we can even give it some kind of like Gyarados treatment. You know, retroactively throw in some kind of other move. Maybe Flamethrower, so that means we have Ice Beam, Flamethrower, Ground, and Psychic coverage on the stab, and then the Sheer Force ability. So that was my way of just making Claydol work. You buff up its speed, that way it can actually be competitive, you give it some special attack, and then you give it Sheer Force, that way it can use all of its coverage really well, and then try to smack things around. I think it could work. So that is Claydol for the potential Mega, and then next up, we are going to have Mega Kecleon. Kecleon, as it is right now, is just right on the edge of competitive viability, and I think it is a very good Pokemon to potentially also get a Mega and really play up onto its lore. It's one of the very, very few Protean Pokemon, and it works out pretty well that you go like Power Punch into Protean priority attacker, so giving it a Mega Evolution and then buffing up its stats could be a very powerful option. Now, we would have to go kind of crazy on the stats, because I was thinking that it would need at least a 150 in attack, or else there's kind of no point, because Life Orb Kecleon will do as much damage or more if it goes under that 150 attack. And since we're already playing for the priority, Life Orb Kecleon kind of wins out over the Mega, which defeats the purpose of having a Mega. I feel it'd be like Mega Scizor. Mega Scizor falls flat compared to just straight up Scizor with a Life Orb if you're just worrying about trying to Swords Dance and then priority beat people down, and you're not playing like a tankier game. So that means like Mega Kecleon would just kind of fall to the side. Now, since Mega Kecleon does have that good special defense, we can cut that down and maybe put the rest of the points into speed. So turn it into a physical-ish Greninja, like a more dedicated physical Pokemon, because when we look at Kecleon, it does get some really neat coverage. Like, we have Ice Punch, Fire Punch, so we have Elemental Punches. We can also run the Drain Punch for a little bit of sustain, Knock Off, Last Resort, and then we do still have Sucker Punch, Shadow Sneak, lead with a Fake Out, maybe get a little bit of damage out of that because now we're boosting Kecleon's attack. So it would be a pretty nutty overhaul, but it could really make this Pokemon have a cooler identity. I've always been a fan of Kecleon, so kind of elevating it to the next level with a Mega, I think is something that a lot of people would be happy to see, and then keeping its Protean, keeping its Kecleon-ness into that Mega state would just be awesome. And now, it's time for the top 3 potential Hoenn Mega Pokemon. Now, why top 3? Well, I honestly consider it a tie. that I cannot find a Pokemon that is more or less deserving than any of the ones up here, and they all deserve it about equally, which is a lot. So we have Castform, I'll explain it in a bit, Milotic, and Flygon. So when we talk about Flygon, Flygon is a really interesting one when it comes to Mega, because there was an article that came out about an interview with Ken Sugimori, and the biggest reason, if not the only reason, why we didn't get Mega Flygon in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire is because there was just artist block. That the Pokemon has been wanted as a Mega by so many people, and it was one of like the most hype potential Megas for anything, not even just the Hoenn region, just Megas in general, and because of that, Game Freak didn't want to let us down on it, but there wasn't a way to get it out in time, so it got delayed for potentially a future game. Hey, why not Pokemon Sun and Moon? That would be absolutely perfect. So why Mega Flygon? Well, it has a great base design that a lot of people love its design to begin with, so augmenting that would be really awesome. It's definitely not used enough because it's tragically weak, and as I mentioned before, it's a fan favorite. Everyone wants this Pokemon as a Mega, and Game Freak wants to give it to us as a Mega, so really it's a win-win. As for Milotic, Milotic is another Pokemon that we should have had in the game. That it being a Mega of Wallace, so many ways that could play into the story in a really cool way, and then it's also just a straight up beautiful Pokemon. It's also a fairly strong Pokemon, some pretty good wall, and maybe even just playing up on it being an even tankier Pokemon, or giving it some offenses to fight behind, could make it a very viable, if not an overpowered Pokemon as a Mega, and again, this Pokemon is loved by fans. So when it comes to Mega Flygon and Mega Milotic, I feel like there's an even split of people that would put them on their #1 list, but then we go into Castform. Now, why should we give Castform Mega Evolution? It has boobs, kind of? Like, I know that a lot of people are very confused, but here's my reasoning for Castform. That it does have mediocre stats, and it needs a lot to be saved, but Castform is potentially one of the most powerful Pokemon that can exist in the game. It just needs the help from a Mega Evolution, or an Evolution, or some kind of major stat overhaul, because when we look at it, this Pokemon gets some crazy moves. Weather Ball, which means you're going to have a stab move in whatever weather you're in. That's pretty good. Also, look at all these high base power moves as well, like Hydro Pump, Fire Blast, Blizzard, Hurricane, Thunder. All these moves also synergize with weather in some way. So we're looking at Blizzard, can't miss in Hail. That means Castform works on a Hail team. Weather Ball, Rain Castform is absolutely insane, because Weather Ball, when it gets into its rainy form, gets Stab, 100 base power because Weather Ball gets double power in weather. So we have a Water Stab move that gets 100 base power, then we have Thunder, which can't miss in rain, and then we also get Hurricane, which can't miss in rain. That's way too powerful. If Castform had, you know, hundreds or over 100 in any of those base stats that could matter, you know, like a 105 base speed, and then it could play into rain, this Pokemon would be used all the time, and since it is the main weather Pokemon that we have, it should be used on almost any team involving weather, and I think a Mega Evolution would be the best way to balance that, because you're giving up your one Mega slot to really put everything into your range strategy, and maybe for an ability, I was thinking like a new ability, Weather Rush, or something like that. That way it's kind of like a Swift Swim or a Sand Rush that whenever there's any weather on the field, Castform gets double speed, or maybe even like 1.5 speed just to kind of balance it, or like 1.5 speed and 1.5 special attack. Something to where its stats won't fall flat, because remember, with the Mega Evolution, you are giving up an item, which means you aren't getting Life Orb, so even if it does get plus 50 into its special attack, it's not going to hit ridiculously hard, so it's going to need like a full-on ability that really makes it, or maybe, you know, it does get transformed, so it can transform into a different typing, depending on the weather, gains double speed in that weather, and then hopefully just gets like a ton of special attack and stuff, and then it just uses great moves after that. And then it can run other moves, you know, Thunderbolt if it's not running rain, like if you're in the sun, you use Thunderbolt instead, or also you can have access to the Ice Beam to take down Dragon-type Pokemon. This is what I mean, guys. Castform is just a few stat points and a little bit better of an ability from being one of the strongest Pokemon in the game, or at least one of the strongest options for any kind of weather team. I would love to see the Mega elevate Castform to that level. So hopefully, with all of that explanation, you can understand why I'm having a hard time deciding between those three for the #1 spot, or at least the top 3 spot, because once you get into Castform, it makes the most sense competitively, or as like a massive boost into a strong Pokemon, and then the other two are just design, lore, and fan favorites to a degree that cannot be ignored. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.